HONK, A Tale of Praise. Crickets chirp, chirp, chirp their lullaby, but Fuzby didn't hear them. He sat on his bed, and for the 10th time he tried to sing sweetly. A creaky croak from his throat teetered and tumbled into an ugly honk instead. "We peacocks sound more like donkeys than birds," Fuzby fumed. "Hee-haw, hee-haw, honk, honk, honk." He began to cry. Tears splattered down onto a crumpled invitation on his quilt. He read it again. "You're invited. Come and sing for God." Who? The new chicks of the Garden of Eden. Where? Concert Cathedral. When? Tomorrow night. Fuzby heard Pop Peacock shuffle up behind him. "Why so blue, Fuzz?" Pop asked. Fuzby just shrugged. "Fuzby?" Fuzby's grandpop sat down and wrapped his warm wing around him. Then Fuzby let it all spill out. "Pop, is there any way to make my praise better? All I do is honk. God won't like my voice, and the other birds praise God better than me. I just want to stay home." When Fuzby was done, wise old Pop Peacock leaned in close. "I have a secret just for you," said Pop with a twinkle under his bushy brows. Fuzby leaned in closer to hear. "There will be someone at the concert who will make your praise absolutely, stunningly spectacular," whispered Pop. "Who?" "Oh, I think you'll know him when you see him. Don't worry." Fuzby waited for Pop to say more, but after ruffling his head, the older peacock eased himself off the bed. He turned when he reached the door. "Good night, Fuzz." "Night," Fuzby smiled in the glow of his nightlight. The Garden of Eden burst to life at the crack of dawn. Early birds were already flying to the concert cathedral to grab a good seat. Fuzby heard them above his roof and jumped out of bed. "Mom!" He scuttled into the kitchen. "Pop Peacock said that today my praise is going to be stunningly spectacular," Fuzby announced with a flourish of his wing. "We just have to find a certain person at the concert." "Who?" asked Mother. "The one who will make my praise beautiful," cried Fuzby as he zigzagged down the hallway. "Oh, and that we shall. But first, you must go and wash up." Mother pushed Fuzby out the door. "Off to the bird bath with you." Fuzby blinked his eyes. The garden was a rainbow of color. Dewdrops glistened on petals. New blooms had burst open to greet God. They begged Fuzby to pick them. God must be very important, Fuzby thought. At the bird bath, Fuzby's feet plip-plopped into the water. He laughed and splashed. The bath was crowded and everyone was twittering about the big night ahead. At one side of the bath, the chickadee choir was practicing their song for God. "Chickadee-dee-dee!" Fuzby grinned and tried to join them. But the moment he opened his mouth, he wished he hadn't. Honk! Silence fell over the bird bath. Fuzby didn't dare look up. He knew his cheeks were blushing. Dragging his wet tail behind him, he sloshed out of the water and back to his home. When it was time to leave for the concert, Fuzby wasn't excited anymore. The only thing that could make him smile was the thought that his praise would be stunningly spectacular. Birds of every size and color filled the sky over Eden. The rivers also carried birds to the concert cathedral. At the entrance, each family and flock proudly flashed their invitations. The trumpeter swans nodded to every passing family, flapping their elegant wings. The hummingbirds buzzed and flitted about and were gone in a flash. The bashful finches blushed and smiled. The flamingos flounced their flashy pink feathers. When Fuzby and his parents finally reached the cathedral, the sun was beginning to set. He got a lump in his throat. Soon, he and his peacock cousins would be singing for God. He scanned the crowd for Pop Peacock's friend, the one who would make his praise beautiful. Time was running out. Fuzby and his family soon found the peacock choir. "You're going to do great," said his dad. Fuzby flashed a smile, but then his eyes grew wide. The concert had begun. He groaned, "Not yet!" Far off down the huge hall, he could hear the soft strains of the meadowlarks. They sang the very first song. Impressive, thought Fuzby as he listened to their music. Rays of light streamed through the windows and danced in the rafters with the new melody. Fuzby knew that God would be happy with the meadowlark's song. Fuzby rushed over to the peacock choir and found his spot just as the choir of wrens began their piece on stage. They soon ended their song with a long trill. The goldfinches followed. "What a tune," said Fuzby to himself. "Maybe God will like the finch's song or the wren's praise better than mine." He still had not found Pop Peacock's friend. He was getting worried. Closer now, a nightingale sang a crystal clear solo. Then another sang, then another. "We're next," whispered another peacock. In unison, the nightingales crescendoed, and with a perfect fifth, they finished their song. Then there was silence. The peacocks were next. Fuzby tried to stand tall, but his heart flip-flopped in his chest. Then God appeared before the little peacock choir and smiled. Fuzby gasped, forgetting about the finches and the nightingales and everything but God's smile. The choir burst with praise at the sight of God. They opened wide their tiny beaks, filled their lungs, and began to honk, honk, honk. Fuzby's honk was still a honk, but he didn't care. He was too busy praising God. God was so beautiful and so wonderful. All the peacocks in the choir just had to sing. Honk, honk, honk resounded through the garden. The louder Fuzby sang, the more God smiled, and the more he smiled, the louder Fuzby sang. It seemed that when Fuzby sang for God, it was beautiful. He sang only for God and knew it sounded splendid to him. Flocks of other birds fluttered in to see the singers, crowding around to listen. Some smiled and others honked along. "How wonderful," some whispered. "Amazing." Amazing, thought Fuzby, but I never found Pop's friend to help me out. What are they talking about? What are they looking at? He looked behind him, and suddenly his eyes fixed on a curtain of feathers, shining and shimmering. Their tails! All the young peacocks' tails were fanned out for the first time. Every feather was praising God. All at once, Fuzby realized he had found the one who could make his praise beautiful. It was God. When they had finished their song, God clapped his hands and said, "Your praise is very, very good, splendid, and spectacularly stunning. You see, it wasn't your honk that needed changing. It was your heart." Fuzby grinned as he spotted Pop Peacock standing in the crowd. Somehow he knew that Pop had been praising right along with them.